Okay, so let's dive into it. Let's get into the important stuff. The reason you are here. We are going to be talking about an alternative way of doing a lean coffee. A lean coffee, I'm sure many of you have experienced before. A mirror board is loading on your screen. Give it a moment, it'll be right there with you. And once it arrives, the first thing I would love to know is where you sit with your own experience with lean coffees. So, on the left-hand side of the scale, you've never been part of a lean coffee. As the scale progresses onward, it's like once or twice, it's a regular feature versus it's one of my go-to techniques. The way you will share your perspective is by dragging and dropping one of these little coffee cup icons onto the duality line accordingly, onto that scale. If you prefer to interact, type in the chat or just speak aloud. Where do you sit on your current experience with lean coffees? All right, so we've got someone who's never done it before. A couple of people have never done it before. For some, it's their go-to technique. It's one of the things in their toolbox. And we've got a couple of once or twice. Nice. Now, what about your thoughts on lean coffees in a few words? So there are post-it notes here. Type inside those post-it notes to share in a few words your perspective on lean coffees. What are they for you? And again, you may choose to do so inside the Butter chats or speaking aloud if you're feeling brave. Interact with us however you prefer to do so. And as you do that, I'm going to try and eat a bite of my bagel. If for whatever reason you cannot access the mirror board, I will share a link in the chat. It should be visible inside your Miro screen. I am aware some of you may not be joining from a laptop or a device, however, so a link is on its way in the chat now. All right, let's reflect upon some of the thoughts from people. So it's a good way to start the week. It's great for meetups. It's good for group discussions. It's informal and encourages ideas and creativity. People get more engagement from it because they own the agenda. It's inclusive. It's great for weekly lunch and learns. And Jamie shared how it's great for to be used as part of a retrospective if they run out of time to create a retrospective. It gives a podium for people to talk about what they want to talk about. Yes, so it's an agendaless format for engaging a group of people on a chosen topic. Created by Mr. Lightsmith, I believe, Jeremy Lightsmith in Seattle, somewhere in a coffee shop in Seattle. I was actually in Seattle earlier this year writing my new book in a coffee shop and learned that they'd created it in Seattle. And I thought that was very cool. I was actually in a coffee shop I'd chosen because it was called Manifesto Coffee. The Agile folk among you will probably realize why I chose that coffee shop. Purely a Google one. That sounds like a fun name. I'll go sit in there. Anyway, it's a great format, and the reason they created it, one of the reasons they created it, was to provide people the opportunity to choose what they focus on, but also because it was a somewhat lazy way of structuring a session. They didn't have to do a huge amount of prep beforehand. Honest answer. Now, we've got various experiences with a lean coffee, and what we're going to start with is practicing the original example of it. So what I'm going to invite you to do, and there's a clear reason why we're practicing the original example of it, is to highlight a few things. First and foremost, we want to allow you, the audience, to choose the topics. So what I'd like you to do inside these green post-it notes, suggest ideas, topics you might want to discuss in a lean coffee. We will then prioritize those, and we're going to do one topic in the traditional format. Add your thoughts on these post-it notes on the screen. Anyone who can't get into the mirror board for whatever reason, feel free to type inside the Teams chat and we can add it onto the board on your behalf. Just a side note, I see this quite often. Sometimes people suggest topics that are quite vague. Try and ensure they are specific enough that someone can understand what you're looking for from that topic. That way, it'll be easier to vote upon when it comes to us doing so. All right, so we've got Kanban flow. We've got my release train is late, aren't they all? We've got more engagement from your teams, metrics using Scrumban, work in progress, dealing with carryovers of PBIs, product backlog increment items, product backlog items, favorite retrospectives, squad silence. Okay, take a look at these options. Begin thinking about which ones of these resonate. We're going to allow another 30 or so seconds for the ideas to come in, and then you're going to vote using, again, the coffee cups on the ones that most resonate with you. You will have only 2 coffee cups each, so 2 votes, folks. The topic with the most votes is the one we're going to start with.
Can you vote on your own, Chris?
I'll allow it, yeah.
Okay.
Now, I cannot see who is voting what, so it's an honor system. Don't use more than 2 votes. I believe that you'll do the right thing here.
So I missed that. How many votes do we have?
2 votes each. Move those coffee cups onto the topic you most want to spend the time on.
And can we use the 2 votes on the same topic, or do we need to choose 2 different topics?
2 different topics, please.
Okay.
No double plussing your own topic. In the lead currently, we have asynchronous stand-ups for virtual teams. There's a couple with 3. In this instance, we are just going with the one with the most votes. So another 30 seconds to get those votes in, and then we're just going to be starting with the top voted one. Oh, it's a tie. It's a tie. As always, had to be. Getting more engagement from your teams and asynchronous stand-ups. Guess what? In the interest of moving on, I'm going to choose the topic. It's going to be about engaging your teams, right? So obviously in a real life scenario, I would probably encourage the team to come to a consensus, but just in the interest of demonstrating and moving us forwards, we are going to be starting with how to get more engagement from your teams. So that goes on to our topic backlog, the one we're going to be discussing. In this instance, we're going to be using a time box of 8 minutes to discuss the topic. For anyone who hasn't done a lean coffee before, we spend 8 minutes talking about the topic, and then if we want to spend more time talking about it, we do a bit of a Roman vote. You know, should we continue or should we move on? We always start with allowing the person who introduced the topic, whose idea it was, to talk about why they introduced it, just to get a bit more context. And then it's just over to you folks to discuss that topic and share thoughts, experiences on it. So whose was that topic?
That was my topic.
Jamie, all right. So give us a quick 30-second pitch for that topic. Why did you suggest it? Why is it important?
Because I have I have 2 Scrum teams. One is very engaged. They're speaking up during daily Scrum. They're speaking up during sprint reviews. All of the events, they're very engaged and speaking up. The other team, it's like pulling teeth to get them to speak at all, and retrospectives especially.
All right. So this actually quite links to someone else's proposed topic, which was around silence, right? It's how you deal with this particular scenario. Ready?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Okay. So over to you, folks. We now have a time box of 8 minutes. We do have the raise your hand functionality if you choose to use it. Talk about this topic. What are your thoughts? What are your suggestions? Over to you.
Well, in my case, Carlos here, what I've been finding to work to get more engagement for the teams, and that was something that I was struggling, was mostly focusing on the sprint goal to actually make the team understand why we're doing what we're doing. So that way, it's not just another job. It's not just I need to fulfill this user story or this PBI because someone's telling me to do it. But since they understand or they are participant in understanding why what they're doing is important, they are a little bit more eager to participate because they know that they're building something greater than just a user story or just my part, but it's part of something greater and it's core of what we do on the sprint planning to create the sprint goal alongside the product owner and alongside the team?
So for me, when I found like I've like quiet teams, it's usually because they don't trust each other as people. And so find some like icebreaker type activities about like what do you do this weekend, favorite cookie, or even like personal roadmap, not roadmaps, personal diagrams. Really help them become people, and then they actually seem to open up a little more because they have that trust between each other.
Idris, you have a thought? Or Amy?
So one thing I've done with my squad is basically when it's like a larger discussion point, not you'll have more vocal people and then you'll have the quieter people, and then you might have a mixture of like people online, people in the room, is basically to like break them up into pairs or smaller groups, and then they can kind of have a smaller discussion which they might feel more comfortable with, and then kind of as a little team bring it back to the group. Because then that hopefully then, because everyone, if they're all on a big call, they're just hoping or waiting for someone to speak, and then no one speaks. But if you break them up, then it's a little bit easier. It's me.
Scott?
Yeah, hey, I would ask a question back to the author, Jamie. What have you done so far to try and increase the engagement? I know lots of people are giving you ideas, but have you tried any of the things that have been mentioned, or have you tried other things to increase engagement? Maybe we start with that, and maybe we've got a jumping off point.
Yeah, sure. Most of what I've tried so far is humanizing the workplace, right? I like someone else brought that up as well in terms of seeing each other as people and really making that human connection first really helps. I find I've tried to give, like, for example, in daily scrum, I've tried to start with the first 5 minutes. So daily scrum doesn't start until, let's say it's 9 o'clock. We would say daily scrum starts at 9:05, but come at 9, because then we just talk about anything, right? Just kind of chit chat like we would if we're in the office. When you go into a meeting room, you're all kind of chatting with each other first before you just dive straight into business. And I notice in this virtual world we're at, and meeting to meeting, you just dive straight into the business and nobody's talking to each other about anything personal. And so I think that goes a long way towards building trust and just seeing each other as humans.
Yeah, that's a good point. My Scrum teams have been using something that we call +1. It's basically a question that we ask every day in daily stand-up. And it's a lot of what you're talking about, just kind of that chit chat, but like, what's your favorite ice cream, or what's a podcast that you're listening to, or a book that you're reading right now? And, as the team works longer and longer together, you start to run out of those questions. So Mondays and Fridays are always the same thing. Mondays are, what did you do over the weekend? Fridays are, what do you have planned for the weekend? There are no quizzes to see if they match up, but it is exactly what you're saying. It's getting everybody to have an opportunity to talk when it's not about work. And it's been really successful for my teams. Finding ways to do that really goes a long way for sure.
All right, I'm just going to pause it there. We've gone almost 5 minutes into the time box. What we would typically do at the end of the time box is allow people to vote. Do we want to continue talking about this, or should we stop? Before we do that, though, what I'd like to do a bit of a sense check on is these questions. Again, duality lines. Let's reflect for a moment on that experience. All right, so you've got a number of these, and just navigate your way around these as you finish them. So all Likert scales. I felt included. I remained focused. I was an active participant. I remember what was discussed, including any techniques referenced. I learned something new. It was a valuable use of my time. And then again, maybe just some thoughts, a few words from your own perspective. And just a bit of feedback loop on your experience from your perspective on that very small sample of a traditional lean coffee. All right, so on the I felt included scale, we're very much towards the right-hand side, so most people agreeing here. Focus, we start to see a few people feeling neutral about it. An active participant, we've got 5 people saying strongly agree. Question, did anyone note down how many different people spoke during that time box?
Was it 4?
It was 4, correct. So active participants, potentially less than 5, but there were 4 people who spoke during the session. In terms of remembering things, kindly, some people were making notes on the screen. Some of the techniques referenced, that doesn't always happen. Learning something new, again, some people less so. We start to see some disagreement here. And valuable use of your time, most people feel that it was a good use of time. Fantastic. That is not always the case in my experience. In terms of a few notes, so great to hear ideas I haven't thought about. Didn't feel if there was an actual solution offered more, and some topics were not followed up. That's probably a consequence more of the shortened time box rather than the approach itself. And great to hear some ideas that someone's tried and also some new ones. Okay. In my experience, and one of the phrases I use all the time is tell me and I forget, teach me and I remember, involve me and I learn. Now, a traditional lean coffee, it does involve people. People get to choose the topic. They get to have an input into what happens. The challenges, and there's a real topical thing about this at the moment. If anyone's seen it, I think the CEO of Zoom was saying that we are too polite as groups of people. We naturally want to ensure that others are heard, and therefore we will wait and not interrupt. And that can come at the cost of our own ability to be part of the conversation. We want to wait for someone else to be heard. And what can happen in the time box of a lean coffee is that sometimes only a couple of people speak. And we've got 20 plus people here. So a couple of people are engaged and active participants. Everyone else is perhaps waiting around for their opportunity to speak. Sometimes they don't get to do so in the time box, and they're more passive members of the discussion as opposed to being active members of the discussion. The quote there from Benjamin Franklin, often attributed to Confucius, is basically how I try and do any sort of session with anyone. Whether it's training, workshops, meetups like this, I want to involve people in the experience. I don't want it to be one-way conversation. So this alternative technique that I'm going to introduce you to is intended to be a bit more structured, but a bit more engaging as a result. And I was mentioning the CEO of Zoom. The reason for that is he says that people don't interrupt one another, and we therefore miss out on opportunities to share our thoughts, to innovate. And this is not about trying to disrespect anyone or avoid people speaking, but I do think there's slightly different ways that we could use that might help more people feel included and involved. So here's how this is going to work. In the same way as before, you will still influence the topic. And in fact, why don't we use the exact same topic as before, just as an example? Because I think that will be very pertinent to use the exact same topic. So what's going to happen? I'm going to bring everyone to here on the screen. This is to be named. I've been calling it the impediment cyclone, but it's not just about impediments. It's a cyclical way of approaching a challenge or problem. So right in the center goes our challenge, how to get more engagement from your teams. We are still going to have a time box, but in this time box, we are going to go around these questions and everyone's going to participate. So the very starting point with relation to this topic, how to get more engagement, I'd like you to begin by sharing on the Post-it notes one thing you wish you knew about this earlier. So this is going to start to try and build empathy about the situation, things that you may not have been aware of the situation to begin with, of that challenge, and it's going to unlock some additional ideas. So start with that. Add your thoughts on these Post-it notes. One thing you wish you knew earlier about this topic. And just for posterity, I'm also going to add the timer again on the screen. And this is where you all interact as much as you're comfortable doing so. Type on side these Post-it notes, speak in the chat. Think about the things you wish you knew earlier about this particular situation. Yeah, so we've got cultural impacts. There is different ways that people engage in different cultures that you may not have been familiar with. Yeah, people might not be enthusiastic about the approach. You might want to know how people can be energized about it. So what energizes that particular group? I can see we've accidentally got a duplicate of that screen. I'm not sure how. Let me delete that. Should be removed. There we go. What was the problem it was creating? So why was there a problem to begin with? How long the team has been around? Yeah. All right. Just another 30 seconds on this, then we're going to move on to the next one. What you should be starting to see is a bunch of different lenses that you could have looked through when it came to this particular challenge. Some that you might not have even thought of. If you've done with this section, why not start looking at the next one? This is going to start to look into your own previous experiences. So what's a way you've tackled this in the past? What's an approach, a technique, or something you've used to deal with this challenge with your teams? We began seeing some of these things during that session, or during the previous version. People started sharing approaches. All right, so some people have called on people directly, others have used breakout rooms, so starting to diverge and allow convergence back together. Connecting as people by sharing personal boards or manuals of me, making an interactive session, team bonding and icebreakers. Spinning a wheel, so making it random, that just builds in a bit of gamification about it. You don't know who's going to go next. Talking sticks, yeah, like we used to do that in person just by throwing an object to one another and say, catch, it's your go. One-on-ones, yeah, loads of different approaches here. All right, next section, sorry. Now begin to think about an idea. Now go blue sky thinking here. Anything. What is an idea you could use that might help solve this particular challenge? You might have been inspired by something you've seen previously. You might have seen something you wish you knew earlier, and that might provoke an idea. Just start chucking ideas, and we're not judging quality of idea here. We're just chucking ideas out there. What could we do to solve this particular challenge as a group? All right, we've got game time. We've got quizzes. A day in the life, yeah, putting on someone else's shoes. How could this have been approached from this lens? You can indeed role play as someone else. So how could this person or this role have approached it? Warm-ups, Xbox nights, or out of office exercises. All right, next one. If you finished up there, in this round, we're going to, or this next part, we're going to leverage that great skill from Whose Line Is It Anyway? Improv. One of the key principles of improv is yes and. And what I'd like you to do is grab someone else's idea. That could be from any section of this board, but someone else's idea and build upon it. Say yes and we could do this, and we could introduce this as well. So we're going to start to accept the ideas that others have suggested and build upon them with our own thoughts. The only rule in this one is that you're not adding on your own idea. It's someone else's. Try and include their original idea in the new Post-it notes so we can see which one you've built upon. Or, as someone's done, draw an arrow to the idea. All right, so we've got virtual happy hours while playing a game. We've got game time and asking the team. We can invite partners along to things. We can lots relating to game time. We're all feeling the fun right now. As you can see, if you start using arrows for them, it can be a bit messy to see which one relates to which one. Now, what we've done there in essentially 6 minutes and 20 seconds is crowdsourced from a larger group of people, lots of different ideas as to this original challenge. More people have been involved as a consequence. There's lots more post-it notes and lots more interaction from people. What I then tend to do is invite further discussion. So what are we seeing here? Is there anything anyone wants to highlight? Any surprises? Any of these that we want to deep dive into? If it's come from the lens of how are we helping Jamie with this situation, I might go back to Jamie and say, hey, which of these stands out to you or would you like to know more about? Is Jamie still there?
Yeah, I was thinking the game time, but build the game around a business or team problem. It's this one.
This one on the left.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we've got basically gamifying it by posing the particular challenge as a business challenge, but in a fun, gamified way. Okay, so we could then look into how we could experiment with that as a group. We could start to co-create that experiment. We could delve further into that. As always, we're trying to enable people to be heard, to share their thoughts, to get ideas, to collaborate. And if it's something that results or is needing an action, then obviously we would capture some actions accordingly to move forwards. Obviously, in this scenario, we're not an individual team that needs to capture an action, but I'm just demonstrating or emphasizing that that is essentially the intent, is to try and identify something to do differently, something that's going to be of value going next. Now, this doesn't have to be just a problem. It could equally be a goal, something that the group wants to achieve. How could we reduce the churn for our customers? Could be in the center. And then again, you could go around this the sequence of questions, unlock the creativity and the information of the group. One of the biggest challenges that I see with companies these days is that they don't make best use of one of the most powerful assets they have, and that is their data, their learning, the information, the tacit knowledge that everyone has. We don't really incentivize that knowledge sharing. We don't make time for it enough. And often the lessons and the failures in particular remain local to the team, and other teams don't benefit from them, so they make the same mistakes again. I believe this variation is a way of unlocking more information about how people have previously tackled things, about how the ideas they have, about things you weren't aware of. It can build empathy. It can help you with lots of ideas. Now, my question after that is, if you see the time box has run out now, my question is, how many people felt included in that one? Just share your thoughts in the comments. I haven't got a duality line to compare and contrast. Probably should have built one of those in. I can see I needed to lock that particular frame of the board because it keeps being moved. That's an error on my part. Perhaps the future challenge should be how to ensure things are locked. All right, so it's more inclusive. It seemed more inclusive. Loved it. Lots of ideas. That's the idea. So this, as I said, is an alternative. You could use this as a retrospective activity to deep dive into the challenge that a team's facing, with the votes going in at the beginning being the most pressing thing that team needs to address at a time. It can be used in a community of practice session where you're just deep diving or discussing topics that people are keen to get some support or to discuss. There are lots of ways you could use this. I believe you can use this for large groups of people just to crowdsource lots of ideas en masse, and then it's just a matter of synthesizing that information, working through what you might want to try, and you might use affinity mapping techniques and otherwise to do so. But it's a bit more structured than a lean coffee. Still allows the democratic voting or democratic process for the group to choose what is most important to them. I believe it's just a bit more inclusive than the traditional format, a bit more structured as a result. And often there's just lots of ideas that can come, lots of things that could inspire you to think differently. Now, what I'd like you to do is practice using this. go out into I'm going to set out breakout rooms, and you will be able to jump into small groups. I will assign them at random and just do the same. Crowdsource a topic, practice using it. This is a template that after this session you will have access to use with your own teams. So I'm going to open up those. Fred, and Walther will be on standby to jump into those sessions if you need a bit of help facilitating them. You are all, I'm sure, experienced facilitators, so you can run this yourselves without us, but do ask if you need our support. And as you can see, I'll just zoom out a moment to show you. There are lots of sections, lots of spare versions of this blank template that you can use with examples next to them for you to practice. Are there any questions before we go into those breakout rooms?
Yeah, I did have a question, Chris. I don't
Shoot.
know, maybe it was in this case, but for example, I saw that most of the participation is throughout the post-its, but I don't know, I have been in my experience that one of the biggest parts of a link off is actually hearing other people. So how do we combine like the writing of the post-its and also like the vocal comments and the participations throughout the microphone, but without consuming that much time because it's time consuming to create the post-its but also to talk. So I don't know what's your suggestion on how we can balance that.
Yeah, so you'll find each group has a different need, a different balance there. I tend to start with the divergent part, which is getting all the thoughts down, and then you save the time for, hey, what do we want to discuss about that? I would tend to position it back to perhaps the person who suggested the original idea and say, hey, what stands out for you? What would you like to do as a consequence? Is there anything else you'd like to explore further? It can just be opened up to the wider group, same sort of questions. Which of these surprises you? Which would you like to try? Which would you like to delve deeper on? That way you're still enabling the audio conversations, people to speak aloud and share their thoughts. We just tend to start with the divergent part first so that everyone gets to be included. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, no,
You
definitely.
can adapt the questions, Alina. These are just prompts there. It's just a structure. As always, with any of my templates, if you think there's a different way of putting something that may better fit your context, feel free. All right, going to open up those random breakout rooms and practice away. Give us a shout if you need us. Bringing everyone back now. So we've all had the opportunity to practice this a little bit. As I mentioned in the kind of the broadcast that I sent to all the groups, once you've familiarized yourself with this approach, you can rattle through new topics in a shorter time frame. So again, ideal for communities of practice, for discussions with your team. This approach is a great way for you to unlock the knowledge, the tacit knowledge of individuals alongside your team. And it's a great way to take the problem to the team first rather than come up with a solution. So based on this topic, what have we got? What's available to us? And then, hey, what do we want to try next as a consequence? You've had the opportunity to practice it now. I'd love to get your thoughts on it. So here is where you should be on the mirror board. Again, duality line. Actually, not a duality line. Vote accordingly. Grab one of those little sticky post-it notes. Will this variation become part of your toolbox or something you're going to try? You've got on the left side, hell yes. Middle's on the fence. Nah, I'm good. It's on the right-hand side. And then we're going to do I still haven't locked things. This is, again, my issue. Bad, Chris, bad. All right, majority on the left-hand side. And then, was this a valuable use of your time? Feedback, always welcome. Allows us to, or enables me to adjust this for next time I run this sort of session. So you have a lot of coffee cups on the screen here. Got an image of Costa. Grab one of these post-it notes and then drag it onto the coffee cup, which represents your experience. Decaf being the worst, the dregs not being great, medium roast is pretty energizing, and espressatively amazing on the right-hand side. Again, issue on my side is I've made these post-its hide behind the coffee cup, so I'm going to send those to the back. And any thoughts as well, add those on the post-it notes. I'm just going to move those to the back. Give me a sec. Okay, add some words inside. Coffee cups have disappeared.
Moved them behind the too far back.
Moved it too far back. Problem is everyone's got the post-it notes highlighted now, so I can't even move those to the front. So 100% decaf is currently in the medium roast section. That's interesting.
Maybe that person only drinks decaf.
Perhaps. That's not me suggesting decaf is a bad thing. Decaf may be for you. And then, last of all, just a bit of a call to action. If you like this, tell others. Yeah, not just the technique, but the session itself. Let people know that you got value from it, and that helps us grow the community. You will also be prompted as you close out Butter for some feedback on the session. Do take a moment to share that. As I said, all feedback is welcome, and it helps us to improve these sessions for next time. And templates will be shared via the meetup group as well. So you'll receive an email with this template that you can download and use immediately with your teams. And if you are feeling inclined to do so, the soundboard is now enabled. If you press reaction on the left-hand side of your screen, you can press, yes, there we go. Show your appreciation audibly. Boom. Really looking forward to hearing how it goes with your teams, the people that you use this with. So do let us know about that as well. On that bombshell. Our next session is currently in October, but we are lining up some other great speakers coming soon. So do expect something in the next few weeks. Look out for that in your inbox.
Cool. Great. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you very much. This was great, Chris.
Thanks a lot, Chris.
Bye, folks. Till next time.
Bye. Bye, guys.